screen. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. This is the second in our workforce webinar series. We have our esteemed panelists and speakers, actually, who have been the co-PIs on a project that we're very excited about with our TSMO Workforce Guidebook. And so I just wanted to get through a couple of housekeeping things, and then we'll let our speakers educate us and really insightfully let us know how we can advance the TSMO workforce. If you don't know, and if you already don't know, the National Operations Center of Excellence, NOCoE, we offer a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. On the upper right hand of your screen, you'll see a box called audio connections. That's just in case you need a phone number if you didn't have the system call you. There's also in the middle on the right-hand side workforce links, a few links to our resources, some resources from the Southeast Transportation Workforce Center that focuses on operations. And then at the bottom right, you have a few more links that are just general NOCoE links that you can connect with us on, Twitter, case studies, and that sort. Just wanted to let you know, by default, all the attendee phones are on listen mode, listen-only mode, but we definitely would encourage you to use the question or discussion pod for any comments, any questions, any suggestions, and insights you might want to share with the group. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And the questions will be read out loud so that we can have everyone participate in case they're joining just by phone. We definitely are thankful for all of you making time to join us as we really kind of keep an eyeball on the future of how we continue to strengthen the workforce, specifically the TSMO workforce. And so with that, I'm just going to kind of give you guys a little bit of a background. And as I mentioned before, we had one webinar previously in March that the recording and the slides are up. And then we got 2 more after today's. And for today, our webinar, we're going to be focusing specifically on 3 topics. And one is, through the guidebook, what were the industry assessments that were completed? Where do we get the background, the general information? The second is going to be career pathways, and just kind of starting to look at it from a different lens, a different perspective, and what resources are there with that. We're also going to be talking about training resources. Training continues to be and still is a very important aspect of any sort of workforce development. So making sure all of you understand how those resources came about, but also how you can use them, as we'll show you later on in the presentation. And just to let you know, this webinar series is being developed from all the work that was done to develop the TSMO Workforce Development Guidebook. And sorry, I had something caught in my throat, but the goal of that guidebook was to assist you in creating meaningful TSMO-related positions that will help advance your organization's maturity. And we really looked at it from, what do practitioners need in order to advance their organization? The guidebook also, if you look at the words in red, it's to get guidance, get advice, understand how roles are changing, and then know how to prepare for tomorrow's workforce. So really a way to bring it all together so that we're not looking at it from a piecemeal perspective. And we just tried to make sure, the PIs, Todd and Stephanie, really tried to make sure that the guidebook was flexible, it was adaptable, there was good sets of tools and examples, and then it was also, able to modify and fit your organization. So with that, I'm gonna be asking Todd and then Stephanie. Todd Sikowski is with Gannett Fleming, and he was one of the co-PIs for our guidebook. And then later we'll have Dr. Stephanie Ivey from the University of Memphis. And so Todd, why don't you go ahead and start us off and give a little quick intro about your background also and your link to this.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for everybody for joining on this wonderful Thursday afternoon. Despite everything that's going on in this world, thanks for taking time to listen a little bit of our work that we did on TSMO Workforce. Before I get started, I'm Todd Simkowski. I work with Gannett Fleming. I'm based in the great state of Wisconsin and based in Madison. I have 24 years experience, and about half of that was in an academic research environment at the Traffic Operations and Safety Laboratory at UW-Madison, and half of it has been in consulting, doing TSMO and ITS type work over my career. So what I'm gonna talk about is some of the industry assessment work we did as part of developing the TSMO Workforce Guidebook, and then I've woven in some newer research that I've done based on being asked to give a presentation last fall out at the 2019 CTSO meeting in Wyoming. So the three areas that we collected industry assessments when we developed the Workforce Guidebook were, we did an academic literature review, we did some public sector interviews, and we had a couple virtual workshops to gather information. I'm going to give a little bit of information, summarize what we found from each. So we did the literature review. We were looking at things like what has been done as far as recruiting and what has been done as far as retaining and career development. What are the best practices within the public sector? Surprisingly, I thought there would be more of a body of knowledge out in the academic journals, but quite frankly, we struggled a little bit to find a lot of information. But what we did find was good, and this is, I tried to boil it down into some of the key findings, and I'll just kind of give the high-level summary of what we found. So I'll just step through some of these. Salary isn't as important in the public sector, but it's still important. The public sector employees tend to place a lower value on compensation than others, but don't forget about it, because a lot of the studies we looked at show that salary and job prospects, meaning is there a career path, are two of the major reasons that people leave, essentially. Training reduces turnover, we found, was documented. And this also has to do with, there's a lot of competing factors when it comes to job churn. I'll mention a little bit later. There's some generational issues entering the workforce that basically shows that we really need to start thinking about just resigning ourselves to know that there's going to be significant churn as new people come into the workforce. People want to be fulfilled as knowledge workers, and part of that is for giving them challenging assignments and allowing them a certain level of independence. And then the last one was, we're talking about flexible work schedules that have many benefits. I think a lot of people are realizing that now as we've been forced to change the ways that we work quite a bit. I'll be curious to see how things revert back to the way they were, or will there be modifications. I've been working from my house for quite a while, and I find it hard to actually go back to a formal office. But so there's a lot of efficiencies that can be achieved when you allow for flexible schedules. One more slide on what we found in the literature review. This one was very interesting. When we looked at performance pay in the public sector specifically, there were mixed results. I think it's intuitive that the gap between the public and private sector is pretty substantial, but one thing that was interesting was how public sector workplaces perform when you have performance pay. And I think reading this a little bit more is they indicate that with performance pay, they actually perform more worse than places that don't have it. And I think this is, one of the trade-offs is you need to be able to manage that performance pay using data. Through my personal experience, I think sometimes there's some animosity in the way that performance pay is doled out in the public sector, but that was kind of an eye-opening, actually seeing it written in research. And then there's this notion of integrating worker and work, which leads to essentially aligning a couple different things, aligning what's expected of the worker, aligning how their work contributes to the organization, and aligning the career goals. And if you can do those three things, that'll help move your organization forward in meeting its mission. One other thing that we saw documented is this shift towards more frequent and less formal work performance reviews. I know some of the big four accounting firms are moving towards a different type of way we do annual, most places do annual work reviews, and maybe have a mid-year check-in once in a while, but I think you're going to see a lot of different formats coming out in the private sector that the public sector might be able to latch onto. And the last one I wanted to touch on, the document across 21 countries, it's a pretty broad study, but the idea of organizations needing empathy, and by being an empathetic organization, employees tend to have more of a willingness to give back to their organization. So it was interesting, the fact that it cut across so many countries. Here's some expanded research. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. This was something done a couple years ago that showed the amount of time spent per job goes down across generations, and you kind of see this trend. Time will tell how the Gen Z ultimately settles into the workforce, but as time has gone on, people have spent less time in their jobs. I'm sure many of you have experienced that. So I think just recognizing that's a force that is going to be hard to push back on, integrating the idea of job churn and the cost associated within how we do business is important. Some interesting additional research came out of the Boston Consulting Group and the Detroit Mobility Lab. I thought this was interesting because within this TSMO space, it's difficult to find actual numbers of what the demand is going to be for a variety of reasons. One of it has to do with the way the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks jobs, but this was interesting and just showing the magnitude of where jobs will be created. 100,000 U.S. mobility jobs over the next decade, 30,000 for engineers. And continuing with the connected automated vehicle workforce estimates, I just mentioned the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the statistics challenge, by then also recognizing there's some concentrations right now, so it's not spread across the U.S. There's some definite hotbeds of where these types of jobs are located, and just showing that there's some increased demand in the way that people are searching for jobs. This we were able to grab from Indeed. And this is some additional information as far as estimates on the number of ads. So kind of coming at from both directions, where people are looking and where employers are listing labs. This is a little dated, but it does give you kind of an order of magnitude. You know, a lot of stuff is actually coming out of Michigan, has done a lot of great work as far as estimating workforce impacts, particularly in the CAV space. This was really validating when they talked about the different types of talent needs across the spectrum. Again, within the subset of TSMO, really focusing on connected and automated vehicles. What was reassuring to see is a lot of these jobs were reflected in what we define as part of developing the TSMO Workforce Guidebook. The next area that we engaged community was through a series of public agency interviews. We looked, again, kind of these two buckets of recruiting and retaining and career development. We talked to the 14 DOTs. Who did we talk to? Just a list of folks we were given the opportunity to have an interview with during the course of the project. And what did we ask? It's kind of the listing of questions that we asked them, again, around these recruiting and retaining questions. You know, what are the most important factors of retaining staff? How are you changing, if you're changing at all or evolving? And we asked people, who should we talk to? Who have you heard through, you know, things like AASHTO and other organizations? Who's doing good stuff, and who should we go talk to? So I think we started out with a short list, and it got bigger as we talked to more and more people, where we got pointed in the right direction. We then had 2 virtual workshops to validate some of our initial findings. We brought the literature review and the findings from the DOT interviews, and we had 2 workshops. One, these are the people who are involved. We had a project panel, private sector, and we focused on a variety of people within the private sector, practitioners doing the work. We actually had a couple HR people from those companies talk, as well as separate private sector recruiting companies. We engaged several universities that are involved in this space. FHWA, we had I think a couple MPOs and representatives from the ITE TSMO Council. So when we boiled it down, we came up with a variety of best practices. One of the things is an employee-centered onboarding process. A lot of times what we heard is, you know, when people start up, they have to go to 20 different people versus 20 people coming to them. So you see it on, you know, LinkedIn. You see, like, when people start at different places, like they have almost a care package at their desk when they start. And I know I've seen people take pictures of them, like, here, it was so easy to start, and then that first week at work went so well. I think it has a long-term impact on how people work. Offer ongoing professional development. This was key. We heard this time and time again. It's one of those aspects that allow people to want to stay in the public sector. There's a perception that there are more training opportunities in the public sector. Mentorship programs, both formal and informal, tend to have an ability to keep people longer in the organization if you have somebody you can go to when things may not be going as good as you might think. The training, again, common theme through this, but cross-functional training. So this helps both the organization and the person as far as opening up opportunities for different career paths. And then the last one under the training and professional development was we need to do a better job of defining career paths for, I'll say, non-civil engineers. We've done a really good job of how engineers flow in an organization. There's a path on how you can become a leader. What we found is that a lot of organizations were successful in hiring, for example, electrical engineers who may not be licensed per se, or other types of specialists, and their career paths aren't as obvious. So I think there's some opportunities there as we try to diversify the workforce, keeping in mind what that career path should be or look like is really important. Different things for human resource benefits. I talked about I talked about the performance-based compensation. Again, I think we heard it was a best practice when we talked to the DOT. Literature contradicts that a little bit. So I would say it's still a best practice, but be really cautious if you're able to implement programs like that. Promoting total compensation, showing the full benefits. I think a lot of companies and even public agencies do this. What's your total compensation package look like when you roll in all the fringe benefits that public sectors tend to have an edge on private sector counterparts and some of the fringes. Routine adjustments based on the private sector comparison. So a couple DOTs we talked to do an annual comparison, a market comparison, and in order to keep people from jumping ship, quite frankly, to keep them close, at least. They recognize that they may not be able to be on par, but they can at least stay close and not fall far too behind too far. We talked a little bit about flexible work arrangements, even allowing not necessarily pinning people to specific offices, allowing one person from one part of the state to function in another position in another part of the state. I think what we're going through now, we're going to find that that's even more feasible and an acceptable arrangement. Ensuring employee recognition is important. I talked about more frequent, regular, and effective feedback. And developing the long-term relationships with universities for recruiting was a best practice that we saw. Not only just establishing those relationships with who you've typically worked with, but also expanding the reach both geographically as well as within different disciplines. A lot of DOTs do a really good job of recruiting civil engineers and transportation planners, maybe not so much from the IT side or other specialized areas that we want to target as far as maturing the organization within the context of TSMO. And then, let's see, I think I touched everything in that slide. All right. Next one, as far as best practices go, clearly articulating your mission and vision is pretty straightforward, and finding your expectations. Some of the things that we saw that DOTs are stepping up to do and actually supporting and financing are things like team celebrations and events. Obviously, there's benefits to continuing to promote diversity activities. Getting back at that empathy issue, showing that you have a safe workplace is really important. And then supporting professional or other work-related organization involvement, which is great. My company and several other companies in the AEC space have special groups in the organization. I think we have 3 or 4. We have a veterans group. We have a future generations group. We have a women's group. So supporting those types of organizations and involvement in them, active role in them, is really important and leads to longer term employment. Allowing for appropriate and creative office space is one of those little aspects that, you know, it's hard to grasp sometimes, but you know, having different types of places people can go to work is important. And then offer extended leave opportunities is one thing that we've heard, especially with, you know, Gen Z people coming in the workforce. I had a CEO of a company say, you know, this is the first time it's really happened where we've got several young employees coming to us and saying, can I take a 2 or 3 month leave of absence without pay? And it's just something that hasn't necessarily been something that they've entertained in the past, but I think they're going to have to. And I don't know how that would play out in the public space, but those are best practices. I did want to thank the project panel and recognize the TRB program officer, Andy Lemer, and that was the research team. So that's all I had, Patrick, on.
Thank you so much, Todd. I think that gave everyone a really good idea of where we got a lot of our insights and information. As you noticed in the research team, University of Memphis was another partner, and Dr. Stephanie Ivey. Stephanie, are you the, I want to say dean, but I think I'm going to butcher it. I'm going to get that wrong.
I'm associate dean.
Associate dean, that's what it is. But she's the associate dean at the University of Memphis, I believe, for civil engineering, and she's going to talk to us a lot about career pathways and you know, a lot of work that Todd's been doing, working with our professionals and practitioners. It gets complemented by a lot of things that Stephanie's been doing, not just only in the education, but also in the industry engagement. So Stephanie, why don't you go ahead and continue the conversation for us on career pathways?
Sure, thanks, Patrick. So as Patrick said, I'm the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Engineering at the University of Memphis. But the way that I really got involved in all of this workforce-related research is that I direct the Southeast Transportation Workforce Center, also established at the university. And I'm going to focus primarily on the work that we did around career pathways. And what I'm going to talk about is a little bit broader than what you'll see within the guidebook. For those of you that were part of the discussion last time in the previous webinar, we mentioned that the guidebook was very much focused on really that post-secondary and beyond workforce pipeline, and specifically only looked at occupations that required 4-year degrees or more. So when we start talking about career pathways, we know that it's incredibly important to think outside of that scope, and so I am going to talk a little bit about the K-12 aspects of this as well. So when we talk about career pathways, I think one of the most important things to think about is what we really mean by that in terms of creating a model that actually works. And so from our standpoint and the work that we've been doing, 3 things really stick out in terms of what you have to develop here. And so first is that you really have to have a comprehensive approach, meaning that you are engaging that entire pipeline and integrating that throughout the work that you're doing. It truly has to be collaborative. We can't afford to operate in silos anymore. And so whether that means that you're thinking about partnerships across the pipeline itself, you know, from K-12 to career, or you're thinking about within your agency, it's very important to recognize that the collaboration across the board really has to happen for these to develop effectively. And then engaged for students or potential workers to really start to understand the value of TSMO and to be attracted into the discipline. We really have to make sure that everything that we're doing is engaging students where they are or workers where they are. and helping to connect them to the real potential that they can achieve through TSMO occupations. So in terms of career pathway models, I've got a couple of examples here of some of the work that we have developed out of the National Transportation Career Pathways Initiative, which also helped inform the work that went into the guidebook. But a couple of additional important points about these, if you're thinking about this within your own organization, or even if you want to adapt some of the ones that have been developed through our project or other venues. Clear guidance on education and training requirements is incredibly important. So one of the things that we see a lot when career pathway models are talked about or they start to be shared, there are so many different ways that students can enter a pathway or a worker could transition between jobs, and we have to really think about how we're portraying this. And so it's very important that someone that is looking at the potential for one of these jobs really understands the education and training requirements and all of the different entry points that might be available for achieving that. And then connections between relevant disciplines. So as Todd was mentioning, you know, we've done a good job in TSMO of focusing on the engineering aspect, particularly within civil engineering, but there is so much more that has to be involved. And so helping, particularly at the college level, students understand that if you're an electrical or a computer engineering major, TSMO might be an area that you want to go into. And so as you know, those of you that are in a university environment might recognize, even within a civil engineering program, students are not always aware of TSMO, and they're frequently not aware even after they graduate. And so if you think about it from that standpoint, if the areas where we know we're doing well really aren't aware, imagine how much further down the path we are with some of these other disciplines that are absolutely essential to start integrating, but yet that recognition of the opportunities is pretty much non-existent. And then creating a coherent structure for advancement. And so Todd talked about this quite a bit in terms of the potential that this has for not only attracting but retaining people in the industry. And that's very important from the outset. People need to understand what these opportunities look like and have a way of visioning for themselves what their future might be. And so all of those things together can create a very comprehensive approach to addressing career pathway models and create something that can actually work for students and potential workers. So in thinking about career pathways, I want to talk briefly about some of the different populations that we're pulling from. So we're going to talk about K-12. We'll also look at university or community college or technical students, and then we'll talk a little bit about incumbent workers as well. But when we think about K-12, I think some of the most important things to keep in mind are, number one, that career awareness. And we have to make sure that students are hearing about these opportunities early and often. So a lot of times, if we are focusing on the K-12 side of the equation, we tend to focus primarily on high school because we know that that's where you get the, I guess, bigger bang for your buck, so to speak. So it's a faster timeline for them to actually enter the workforce. But really, it has to start much earlier. So finding ways to help students understand opportunities in transportation broadly, but then very specifically within TSMO is important very early on. Industry-involved education is, I think, something that you're going to see more and more of as we move forward. The pictures that you see on the slide are from the Transportation STEM Academy at East High School here in Memphis. And I think that is really the thing that has been the most important to the program's success, is that in every single aspect of the student's educational experience, industry is involved, higher education is involved. And from higher education, I mean that across the board. So it's technical colleges, community colleges, as well as universities. So we have all of the stakeholders and all of the players really heavily engaged in the program. And so students have experiences that are unlike anything else that they would get at another high school. And so you can see from the pictures some of the kinds of things that students are working on. But then in the picture below, you also see what looks like basically a meeting. But these are industry partners that have actually come together on a quarterly basis to do everything from identify speakers that are needed for specific courses, or provide mentors for students that are competing in a particular transportation challenge, or providing input on all the curriculum as it gets developed for the program. So all of these aspects are very important for creating a new and unique kind of experience that really engages students. Apprenticeships and internships are also something that is more and more at the forefront. It can be difficult to provide these opportunities for students that aren't 18, but there are ways to do this, particularly through career and technical education programs where the district requires students to have this kind of experience and are able to cover the insurance that companies need in order for students to be able to work with them. The other opportunity there is that many of these programs have training like OSHA, so students can actually have certifications before they ever come to work with a company. And then I think the other thing that's really important with the K-12 side of things is that we have to educate not just the students, but it's also the teachers, the guidance counselors, the parents, because they're very important in terms of when students make decisions about what they want to pursue. When we look at this on the post-secondary side, again, a lot of the things that we talked about with K-12 is still very important here, but there's more emphasis really on connecting the dots between certification and degree programs and then job opportunities. So whether a student is planning to enter at a technical school or a community college and then continue their educational progression, or whether they're planning to enter the job market immediately upon obtaining one of these certifications or degrees, they need to understand what's required for any of those exit points. And so this can involve not only making sure that industry is connected to the program itself, but also in making sure that transfer pathways are well established. And that's something that we struggle with quite a bit, even in something like engineering, where, again, you know, we talk about how we have been successful in terms of TSMO on the civil engineering front. But when you look at transfers from community colleges, one of the real problems is that most community colleges are not providing pre-engineering curriculum in a way that transfers with ABET accreditation. So there's a lot of work that has to happen there. Experiential and service learning is incredibly important for post-secondary students. And so this could be anything from being engaged in a project that is led by the DOT that gives them a real-world learning opportunity to a service aspect where they may actually work for the city or the DOT to create something of value that doesn't currently exist. Apprenticeships and internships are also still crucial for post-secondary students, and you're starting to see these pop up in non-traditional occupations, so things like engineering and computer science and IT, all very TSMO relevant. This is not what you typically used to think of when you thought of an apprenticeship, and now these opportunities exist. And there are models there that can be translated to many different settings. And the importance of these is not just that it helps a student connect to the industry and understand the career opportunity and really start to see themselves and visualize themselves in that role, but it's also really incredibly important for underrepresented students. So this is one of the opportunities that we have for really increasing the diversity of the workforce as well. And then mentoring and role models. So again, this is important for everyone, but particularly for underrepresented students, so that they start to see themselves through these people and in these roles. So here are a couple of examples that I just wanted to point out. One is the Operations Center's Transportation Technology Tournament. So competitions like this are a great way to get students engaged and get them involved in a real-world project that helps to paint the picture of what TSMO is and gets them involved in a very hands-on and engaging way. Another example, these are some of our transportation spotlights that we've developed. I think you might recognize the guy over there on the far right, Patrick, was kind enough to be part of this program, but helping students to understand potential career pathways and opportunities, sharing from professionals, whether they actually meet them or not, is really valuable. So whether they're reading about them or they're meeting them in person, either way, it's very effective for helping students to start to understand not only the opportunities that are available to them, but also the diversity of career pathways and the ways that people have gotten into a particular role. That's some of the most interesting aspects, I think, that we'll find related to this, is that people come into TSMO from so many different areas. And then the picture on the far left is something that we have been working on with the ITS PCB program in developing ITS project profiles as well, so helping students not only understand the people, but also some of the projects that they're connected to. And again, it's all part of trying to create that picture of what TSMO means. Okay, so I have lost internet connection, so I can't change the slides. Hopefully everybody can still hear me, but maybe Patrick, could you change the slides?
I can.
Okay.
And then around how do we approach professional development?
Okay, perfect. So when we start to think about the career pathway development on the post-secondary end of things and then into the workforce, now we're starting to think about how do we as an agency create a plan that is able to empower employees and also the agency to move to the level of TSMO maturity that they're wanting to achieve. So one of the first recommendations that we have in the guidebook is creating an agency professional development plan. And it's important that in this plan it addresses TSMO training and needs by job category. But also I think one of the most important aspects of that is that it has to include all staff. So it's not enough just to train the people that are actually working within TSMO. You have to make sure that agency-wide you're getting the message out and that people understand not only what TSMO is, but also its importance to the operations and the mission of the organization. The other thing within the professional development plan that's important is that it outlines effective delivery formats and also includes both technical and essential skills. You might call those core skills, you might call those soft skills, but basically we all recognize that it's not just the technical skills that are required for successful TSMO operations. It's also the communication, the leadership, and management skills that workers must possess. And then recognizing the potential for this professional development plan to actually build capacity and evolve capabilities and enhance recruitment within the organization. So in terms of building capacity, you're not just, again, creating a workforce within the TSMO group that is more informed, but you're creating a more informed agency-wide workforce, which helps to move the mission of TSMO along. You're evolving capabilities where, let's say, for instance, you have a small agency, and they might not be able to add positions that we outline in the guidebook right away. But what they can do is empower their current workforce with new knowledge and skills and help to move the agency along in from that respect. And then in terms of enhancing recruitment, so if you are providing this professional development across the agency, then you're also lighting that spark within people. So you're going to find people that are in different areas of the organization that are really excited about and interested in what TSMO means and what it provides. And so this is another way for organizations to begin thinking about how can we recruit internally and provide advancement opportunities as well. Okay, I think my internet's back, so I think I can change the slide. All right. So this is just an example of the key elements of the TSMO Workforce Professional Development Framework that we provided within the guidebook. So we've already mentioned that the training guidelines need to be developed by position and indicating which training should be offered organization-wide, just for TSMO-focused staff, and at what staff levels. The content in terms of whether it's technical, managerial, or other communication or interpersonal skills, leadership skills that are involved. Delivery methods, thinking about how the information is most effectively communicated and delivered to the audience that you're trying to reach. And then the source, so whether it's in-house training or training consultants, universities, professional societies, how is this going to be delivered? And so it's very important that an organization really maps this out in order to be most effective in delivery of TSMO career pathway support. And here would be an example of a sample workforce development plan. So the information on the left is basic training information, on the right more advanced. So the things on the left are how an organization might reach its entire staff, whereas things on the right are trainings that would be specifically for people that are already within TSMO and need to advance their skill sets. And you can find more information about this in the guidebook itself, but also on the website where the Operations Center has kind of parsed this out so it's much easier for people to access specific sections that they might be interested in. And the web address is at the bottom of the slide. So finally, in terms of creating career pathway models that work, you know, I think the most important thing is really that coordinated and collaborative approach. We just cannot afford to work in silos, and I mean that across not only organizations outside ourselves, but also within ourselves. And so even at the university level, we need to start thinking more about how do we work across disciplines to deliver this content more effectively. Telling the story of TSMO, so as Todd mentioned, understanding the purpose of a job and how it fits into an agency's mission and how it's impacting a community, that's really important for attracting people to a discipline. And so for this particular aspect, if you are selling TSMO and telling the story of how it's important, how it affects the agency's mission, this is really how you can start to see a change in terms of people entering the discipline. And then matching the message to the audience, so recognizing that where a person is along that career pathway really matters. So if they're a student in K-12, or if they're a student at a technical school, or if they're already in the workforce and thinking about transitioning, those different points, different things matter to a person as they're thinking about what they want to pursue next. And so really trying to match those messages is crucial. And then finally, flexibility and innovation. So, you know, I think probably the hallmark of TSMO is the fact that we are integrating innovations and technological advances and evolving the discipline to create efficiencies and safety and operational achievements that were not ever possible before. And so that same mindset has to be applied to workforce development and specifically to career pathway development, and thinking about how do we start to be more flexible about disciplines that we're attracting, entry points into the profession, and then really thinking about innovative ways to achieve our workforce goals. And so with that, I think now Todd has the last section.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie. Well, Patrick cues us up. What I'm going to talk about next is what we did as part of the workforce development, workforce guidebook development, as far as cataloging what's available as far as training and professional development. So we looked at over 24 providers of training and research, both in the public and private sector, and we categorized each course there, or each course that's offered, or if an organization provides certifications, And then we also categorized it by whether they're doing direct TSMO research or what we categorize as indirect. And here's just a listing of everybody. We tried to turn all the stones over to see what was available. So I was very thankful that Stephanie's graduate students were able to do most of the heavy lifting on this activity. As preparing for this webinar today, I actually just wanted to do a quick snapshot of one example. I just went to the NHI, the most recent NHI catalog, and boy, if you wanted to learn about construction and maintenance and payment of materials, structures, that's your place to go. But I categorized where I showed on this pie chart where ITS and design and traffic operations falls. I would characterize maybe a third of the design and traffic ops courses could fall under the TSMO umbrella. Some are maybe more signing and marking oriented, but you can see it's relatively small proportion. I guess one thing I just plan to see there are potential future opportunities to strengthen TSMO training within NHI. What we did was, when we looked at each one of those organizations, what they offer as far as training, we put them in different buckets. These are the different topical areas, and we also characterize the coursework as whether being introductory, basic, or advanced. We found over 300 at the time. One thing that we want to make sure to do is, as new courses become available, and I do a little advertising for Patrick, that we want to insert them into the database that actually is being built on the NOCoE website. And hopefully we'll show that to you quickly at the tail end here. When you break those categories down, this is just how they play out. It's a pretty steep bell curve where most of the courses were categorized as basic, and you got a couple of advanced and a couple of introductory classes. So what did we actually find when we looked at this? Almost half are free. Costing is relatively reasonable. You usually get group discounts, or if you're a member of the organization, you get a discounted rates. And most are done within a week, and 2/3 are done in 1 day. And a lot of them you can get PDHs if you need to maintain your licensure. So not only did we catalog what was available as far as professional training, we also looked at kind of the pipeline coming out of undergraduate and graduate courses offered at ABET accredited institutions. So again, this is an area that Stephanie's students did a great job of digging into what was available across all of the ABET accredited schools. You can see here at the undergraduate level, there's a huge emphasis on engineering and design, over half of it. Operations and planning, we get a smaller proportion. But we did see a shift to more the specialized areas when we looked at the graduate level classes in these 4 areas: operations, safety, technologies, and more of the network and systems analysis. We kind of knew that, but we wanted to have numbers. And again, this is a database that we've made available online. And what did we do? This is a little foreshadowing for the next webinar where, as part of the project, we developed 19 positions that you may want to consider as you continue to mature your organization. But what we did is we took each one of those educational categories and we matched up what was available, currently available, and tried to find out where the gaps were. So the way you interpret this graph, we tried to use the consumer reports model, and the areas that have the hollow circles are the areas that need some attention, and the solid circles would be the areas that there's pretty good training already available. And we've given some guidance for each position on, what that next level of training might look like. And Stephanie did talk about this a little bit. It's just in a slightly different format, where we talked about how all of it was ultimately rolled into professional development framework that should be customized to look at, what are you going to do for your organization? What are you going to do for TSMO-focused staff? What are you going to do for other staff in different levels within that staff? All the way to who's delivering it. And that's actually all I had, Patrick, as far by way of what's available for training. I don't know if you wanted to transition to just give a snapshot quick of the website.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let me just make sure none of my emails pop up on that. And what we're going to show you is the 300 or so training courses that Todd had mentioned. It basically was the precursor for a database. And so the students that worked on it did a great job figuring it out, categorizing it, and putting in all the information. Just to kind of show you how I got here, if you come to our homepage, you'll see in the right-hand corner under Key Activities, Workforce Development. And when you click there, you basically come to the one place where we have all our workforce resources. And under there, on the left-hand side with the menu, you'll see Workforce Training. And under Workforce Training, besides the description, you'll also see the TSMO Training Database. So when you get here, it works as a search function specific to the training courses that we have. So it doesn't do this site-wide or like a Google search, but it's really just on this particular database, if you could call it that. If you wanted to, you can definitely sort it by organization, that you need to take courses with the American Society of Civil Engineers or ITE. Then you could go ahead and just see them. Or another one is sites that happen. If you're looking at it for category and you're just curious, you want to advance or see where you can lead your team to be able to get more information, like in data management. And then if you were curious about fees or delivery method or mode, and even if you just did a broad search like data management, here are all the data management courses that come up. And we try to give you enough information to make an informed click. Well, let's say the first one was, great, you needed to have someone be trained up on archiving data. Well, here you go. And the information that we had described to you, you'll see the organization, what the description is, the website, and the fees, and how long, what type of level it is, and what type of credentials. So everything you need to know about the particular training is available for all the, if not most of the 300. And so, I think this is a good point to point out to everyone. NOCoE is not the training provider, but we're just the aggregator so that you can search and look for it. If that's not what you're looking for, you're actually looking for, advanced or a little bit more intense kind of connected vehicle training on data, markets, and policy. Well, here you go, and who gives it, what do you get, how much is it? This one is one that drives the average cost of all of our training just a little bit higher. So there definitely is, there are ones that are free. I believe this one's still pay a little, but from TRB. But there are ones that are free. They're not all for pay. And we did this with an intent of just being able to allow a manager or even a practitioner or just some entry-level person that needs to be like, I need to get better. Let's say they were like, you know, I need to learn what this traffic incident management is about. They didn't teach me this at school or something. And then here you go. So then you just kind of start looking through it and you can get it. So that's just a quick snapshot. Encourage you to go check it out. We do ask that if you find any inconsistencies, any mistakes or outdated information, you give us an email. Don't throw your hands up and get frustrated as to why it's old information. It's just things need to be refreshed from time to time. So just let us know and we'll get on it and we'll be able to update it really quickly. So, oops, go away, Internet Explorer. That's what happens when you click the wrong thing. So let me bring that back to us. And then as Todd finished up and kind of told you about the training, there were a few other things kind of that we wanted to mention today, but that was the bulk of it. You heard, you know, what type of assessments, where we got our information, and what is that information really materialized to? It materialized into career pathways that we also recognize is not just the information in the guidebook, but other initiatives that are going on, especially with like the Southeast Transportation Workforce Center and the National Network for our National Transportation Workforce Initiative. And then a few more training resources, because you heard from a lot of the feedback that we got, you know, training helps reduce churn. It helps in retention. So the more training that's available for your team, the better retention rates you're going to get. The kind of last bit that we wanted to share with you today are a few other things of what's going on in the industry and what's next. So, you know, I'm just going to transition into this where we are going to start to look at the paraprofessional workforce specific to TSMO. Those are your TMC operators, safety service patrol, technicians. These are people without that university degree, but are critical, if not, they're critical and I'll use the word essential for TSMO to succeed. You know, you can have the best systems engineering document, but it's not going to mean anything if you can't maintain it. So then what do we do about that workforce? So we're just starting those activities. The web page that you just saw with all the workforce resources, that's going to get an update sometime in the next 6 to 9 months or so, really allowing us to be able to just present the information a little bit better. Workforce development is becoming a stronger strategic focus for NOCoE, so just let you know that. But my main thing for right now is actually to let you all know we have announced, and it is open right now, the NOCoE Fellowship, and we're gearing it and we're targeting the entry to mid-level professionals that are out there. If you notice, a lot of the fellowships are for senior management or, you know, potential leaders and future leaders. But to do a fellowship for entry to mid-level folks where they can benefit so much from being exposed on a national level with peers around the country. And not just your TSMO division, but open to all divisions. That's really where we wanted to focus this fellowship. So if you go on our website or if you just search, you know, NOCoE TSMO Fellowship, you should be able to get here. But we really wanted to provide opportunities, you know, allow them to develop KSAs, in particular their, you know, core skills or soft skills. I guess power skills is the one I like to describe it, but also abilities if they can, but definitely knowledge. And the work that they do and the participation in the fellowship program really is meant to support their long-term career growth. You know, so some of the benefits might not be immediate, but we know, all of you know, it's definitely worthwhile. The application process is, I think, unique. The first thing is they need to connect with us, either myself or the NOCoE LinkedIn page. to let us know and provide us their LinkedIn profile. And with their LinkedIn profile, we want something more than just oh, you know, one-liners, like describe your work positions, describe some of your projects that you had. Make sure it's a recent, good photo. You know, don't put your selfie snapshot up there type of thing. The next generation is already judged and evaluated on their LinkedIn profile. So we just want to continue encouraging that. And then the second part of the application process for the individual is to provide a 5-minute video, and they have to answer the questions that you see there. And the video is an opportunity for us to, one, get them used to just even doing a video, but also looking at their speaking skills, or just even, you know, kind of who are we working with, really getting into currently how we're working. So there's other requirements, there's other kind of a few things in the application process, making sure your supervisor's on board, but this is the bulk of the individual's responsibility. So if you know anyone and you have someone in mind, please encourage them to apply. The application period will be open until May, and then we're going to start with about 3 to 5 people this first year and see how many we can support. Just to let you know, we have 2 more webinars coming up. The next one is really going to be on position descriptions, how we get through that, understanding HR resources, and then we'll round it out with really looking at what do we mean by paraprofessionals, and what does that mean for the next phase of workforce development going forward. And this is if you can find us. So at this time, I wanted to kind of encourage anyone to ask a question. Didn't see anyone put anything in. I think sometimes that's a byproduct of having excellent speakers present really good, clear information. But as we move into the Q&A, I wanted to let you know there were a couple of reports that both Todd and Stephanie were the primary authors for. The guidebook here, but some of the career pathway stuff that Stephanie also had is available, and if you wanted to learn more about the Southeast Transportation Workforce Center, you'll see it in this download pod right underneath Todd's picture, and a couple of the links of where we have some of the online materials. But I guess, you know, as we wait to see if we have a couple questions coming in, you know, Todd, what other insights did you get from some of the interviews, and you know, you showed us a lot with the best practices on the public sector side, but from the private sector angle, what are some of the similarities, and how do we understand that for TSMO?
Similarities. Okay, that's a good question. I think, you know, a lot of the private sector is, I don't know, it's kind of chicken and the egg. One takes the lead from the other. So a lot of the stuff we developed while it was focused predominantly public sector DOT, we recognize DOTs aren't going to be able to hire necessarily all of those folks that we recommended for a variety of reasons. So what we fully realize is that private sector may be asked to step in to support those types of positions that we've defined, either, well, private sector or even university partners in some cases, because those higher level specialized positions, you know, there's a desire to work within a university environment versus maybe even the private sector or even the public sector. As far as, so that's one thing that I just wanted to clarify, is that this is not exclusively public sector focus. We realize that as partners in maturing TSMO across our industry, there's a significant role for the private sector to play. As far as other similarities, I'm drawing a blank on else. If Stephanie, do you have any thoughts on on anything?
Well, I think one of the other things to think about is, when we talk about TSMO, we're very frequently thinking about it just from the narrow focus of really traffic operations, but recognizing that there are analogous roles across the industry in everything from transit to freight. And so realizing that there are opportunities to really leverage things that have been developed in all of these different areas and share that across is really beneficial. So I think a lot of times too we see more of the innovation coming out of the private sector side as far as workforce development goes, and so then that can help to direct some of the activities that public agencies might want to try as well.
Yeah, those are some really good points. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
I was going to say one observation I've come to appreciate is that what we're doing in TSMO follows suit of some other recent activities that DOTs have had to deal with. And what comes to mind is when the Highway Safety Improvement Program was officially designated as a funding source. I think what I've seen is 10 years behind where DOTs were when they had to deal with, okay, how do we become more skilled and sophisticated on how we assess safety within the organization, both engineering and behavioral. So there's some parallels there that I've seen as we've gone through this, and I've worked on other TSMO projects around the country. And some of it's a really good model to follow, where DOTs have had to strengthen their analytical capabilities, for example, to deal with higher-end statistical analysis of safety projects and things like that. There's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and especially when you look at not only previous programs but previous generations. There's something that's kind of always been known that the younger the generation, the more frequent the job churn, the more frequent we, I guess, change jobs, and I wonder if that's a stigma that is, what are the pros and cons of it? Or, it seems like more of a double-edged sword these days, especially for me. If I think back, like, I probably am averaging a little over 3 years per organization. Like, from both of your guys' perspectives, what do you guys think are some motivation or some factors? And then, is it necessarily a bad thing, or what are some of the good things that come out of that?
I don't think it's, I guess I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's something we just need to come to realization it's a reality. And how do we deal with that reality? Well, I think some of our institutional systems aren't prepared to deal with it. And you talk to people across DOTs on how long it takes to fill positions. Boy, if you're talking people are changing jobs every 2 years and it takes 6 months to hire a position for whatever reason, we've got some work to do. So I think we need to adapt to be more nimble in dealing with that churn. How we get there, I don't know exactly, but go ahead.
I was just going to add from the students' perspective, and we actually had a summit here a couple of months ago and had a panel of students, and this was one of the questions that the industry folks in the audience were asking them is, what determines whether or not you stay with an agency, and are you thinking about this as a 1 to 2 year commitment versus something longer term? And it was really interesting to hear the responses from the students because, for the most part, they really are looking for something longer term. And so I think we have the opportunity, particularly with TSMO, to really ensure that we are engaging them right off the bat and helping them understand the importance of their role, because that's really what they're looking for. And it's not so much that they want to have the top job the minute they leave college, which we have heard a lot about. They are willing to wait, but what they aren't willing to do is wait without knowing what's next and understanding how they fit. And so I think that's where we really have a great opportunity to make the case for why TSMO and make the case for why should you stay with us. So I agree with Todd that it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it is an opportunity for agencies to really rethink their workforce development strategies and their career pathway approaches to strengthen that pipeline.
Yeah, and I think, Stephanie, one of your earlier points was that the career pathways need to be clear for not just a new generation, but for every person in the organization. And career pathways also, does not need to lead towards some sort of, really big leadership role. Some people might just want to stay in an organization, but just maybe experience every, 3 different areas. We really need to understand, that career pathways are not linear. They're not upward all the time. They're horizontal. They're zigzag, and people are willing to do that as long as they see that path. And that was something that I gleaned from the comments you made earlier. Seeing as how we don't have any questions, I guess Stephanie and Todd, I'll leave you guys with maybe any closing thoughts, and then we'll call it good for today. But Stephanie, maybe you can start, and then Todd, and then we'll say thanks to everyone.
I guess the only other thing that I would add, or really, I guess, more reemphasize, is that, the way that we approach workforce development in general, but really for TSMO, has to change in terms of that collaborative effort. And it really does have to be, across the board. So within an agency, across the pipeline itself. When you're talking about higher education, it's got to be across disciplines. So I think moving towards a much more collaborative approach is probably one of the best ways that we will start to develop that robust workforce that we need.
I guess I'd just like to say thanks again for the opportunity to share what we worked on, and what Patrick, what you built on the NOCoE website, I think is one of the first examples of a sustained effort towards workforce development in this space that I've seen, and hopefully everybody uses it as a resource. It's not a day-to-day thing you tap into, but that occasion where you think, oh, I got to go out and hire somebody, and it's somebody we've never hired before because we have an emerging need. We hope that you use it as a resource to at least maybe take the first 1 or 2 steps in your path forward.
Yeah, and I appreciate both of you. Oh, yeah, we definitely appreciate and thank both of you for your time and the knowledge that you've helped us share and learn from this. I definitely want to tell everyone on the line that the work that's done is really important to everyone we don't know that uses it. And I think that's kind of a different way to look at it is the more we share, the better it is. And the only way we stay ahead of technology is to share better and faster and with more context than computers do. I'd like to just kind of make sure that people realize all the efforts that we're doing is really to break down any silos and as Stephanie mentioned, go across discipline. So if you have resources that you want to share with us, or you want to get involved and you want to know what is next, stay tuned with us, get in contact with us, subscribe to our newsletter, and go around on our website. We definitely thank you for staying with us and being a part of this webinar today. The recorded version along with the presentation slides will be available on our website in a couple of days. And so on behalf of the National Operations Center of Excellence and our two wonderful presenters, Dr. Stephanie Ivey and Todd Zipkowski, we want to say thanks and have a wonderful rest of the day.